Now, I remind everybody, since this is a hearing, it is permissible to ask questions and have answers, from my understanding, at least how it's been done in the past. So if I do ask a question, feel free to answer. It's not like the usual thing where you just kind of stare. Let me be clear about this tax levy that's being proposed here. It is a 6.15% increase in your property tax rate. That tax rate is being hiked from 65 to 69 cents. We keep hearing from city staff, left and right, that your taxes are not going up, your taxes are not going up, only because your EAV is going down. In December of 2009, the City Council increased your EAV from 60 to 65 cents just last year per $100 EAV. So if you do the math, if you combine the proposed rate this year from what we started out last year, from 60 to 69 cents, that is a 15% increase in your property tax rate over the past 2 years. This will, and you mark my words here tonight, this will increase your taxes when your housing values start to recover. You will be paying more in taxes. These rates will never go down. Now, I wish Alderman Baker was here tonight because he seems to be the only one that seems to understand this concept. This council has never, as far as I know, reduced the property tax rate on the city of Dekalb. Do any of you recall? Can any of you respond to that? Do you recall a time? Maybe our historians over here might know the answer to that one. Does anybody recall a time this council has reduced the rate? If so, okay, I'd like to find out more about that. Every time this proposed tax rates, every time this we go through this tax process every year at this time, our mayor constantly, like a broken record, says, it's just a few more pennies a day from your pockets to pay for city pensions. Just a few more pennies. I don't know about you, but anybody have one of those penny jars at home where you put the pennies in and they add up, and then you take it to the bank and you cash it in for like $100? Those add up. Those pennies keep adding up. So I'm sick of hearing that. So please, cut the nonsense with it. It's just a few more pennies a day. I want to point out something interesting. We keep saying that, at least I hear from the council, especially our mayor, that these taxes that we're paying are not such a big burden. They really don't add up. And what's a few more pennies? Most people, the 2010, I don't know if you read this online, but the 2010 township tax assessments were recently issued. And while most people in our community enjoyed a 6% reduction, Mayor Paulson and Alderman Tarazinski received a downward adjustment of 19% and 19.5% on their own properties, respectively. So I would have to argue if this tax rate goes through, you two are not going to be paying as much as the rest of us. So I'd like to take a look at that down the line here. So apparently it's okay for us lowly citizens to pay more taxes, but not for at least two members sitting up there. So enjoy your lower taxes. This is a public hearing, so from what I gather, you can answer my questions. We're not under the usual rules here. But will any of you go on record tonight in front of the press, in front of the folks watching at home, and say, hey, when those EAV values recover in a couple years, will you raise your hand and say, hey, let's lower those EAV, let's lower that tax rate down to what it was before and not spend the extra windfall? Will any of you go on record?
You seem like you're very comfortable behind a microphone.
I am very comfortable behind it.
And you really get a lot of pleasure out of this.
No, I don't. I think it's important that the public
I'd probably like to
knows.
start with the first thing.
Okay.
In your first statement, you said that the city council sat up here just last year and raised the EAV.
No.
I think what you needed to say is that we raised the rate. Well, you did say, though, we raised the EAV.
Then you're welcome to correct me.
I am. So here's the first thing, is that I understand completely what you're talking about in regards to this rate. We are faced with the challenge of using this money as we raise this this rate out here to try to keep pace with these pension funding. Now you're thinking that this extra windfall that may happen 5 years down the road or 10 years down the road from this particular increase, a lot of this stuff is driven by what we're given back from our actuary in regards to what we have to fund the pensions for both the police and fire. Now I don't know what nefarious activity you think we may be up to over here, but I believe at the last meeting when we discussed this, we said that we wanted to basically keep pace with where we were at from last year as far as the same level funding. That wasn't the staff recommendation. The staff had given a higher number, and if I'm not
77
mistaken...
cents is what they
If I'm
want.
not mistaken, Alderman Tarazinski and I both said, let's just keep the rate at the same to try knowing what's
You're
going to
not
happen.
keeping-
What's going to happen with the AV?
You're not keeping the rate the same, you're increasing.
What we were
it.
trying to
You
do
let him
is-
answer the questions. You said that you wanted him to answer questions.
It's okay. I mean,
So go ahead.
It's okay.
That's
No,
all right.
you asked us for an answer, and as I try to answer, you just keep interrupting me. But I know it's difficult, so I'm going to try to,
Okay.
I'm really going to try to answer this question for you. So, we're anticipating that the EAVs are going to go down based on what the assessments are coming out from the DeKalb County Assessor's
Right.
Office. So we're trying to make up for it in that particular capacity. Now, you may have another source of information already out there that's saying, hey, that's not the fact, that everyone's housing values are going up right now.
No, I said they will go up in the future, and that this council will not
But we
change.
can only look at what's in front of us right now for this particular year that's coming up. And if I'm not mistaken, and Mr. Espiritu can correct me on this, where we're trying to levy this particular rate right now, with this increase of, I forget, 3.5 or 4.5 cents, we're trying to keep it the same amount that's going to be levied as last year so we can generate the same amount of dollars. Now, that's not the exercise that we did roughly 4 months ago when we came up with the number to try to meet the demands of the pension funds for the funding of those in fully in 2030. We'd have to raise your rate by 45% per year to meet the demands that have been put out there by both fire and police pension. Now, I don't want to pay an increase of 45% a year for the next 20 years. So I think we were trying to do in the best interest of what's going on here. Now, if you want to take umbrage at that, that's fine.
No,
That's
I'm
great.
just pointing out that once the rate increases, at least from the time I've been observing this council...
It's not just this council, too, Mr. Charvat. I think you can go back in history and go find a government that will actually reduce their taxes. They'll say, you know what, we've looked at this and we're going to start to cut taxes.
And
Find one.
When did they... Well,
Find
I've
one.
been trying to find one. Would you like to help me
It's
find
very impossible in regards to inflation. I'd like to sit down and spend hours and hours discussing economics with you, but
But you're talking the
unfortunately...
rate, not just the dollar values of the houses go up. So you're always getting more money. That's your inflation, Mr. Gallagher.
That's
And the
right.
rate is also a multiplier on top of that.
And then what happens with the pension funds? Which is what this actual dollar amount's
Mm-hmm.
going towards. What happens, do you think, with the pension funds? Do you think that number is going to stop and stay static, or is it going to continue to go up as far as how much money they're going to need for pensioners in the future?
I realize it's going to go up, but we need to find, we need to...
So then what's your solution?
My solution is to make other cuts in the budget. I come up here all the time and point out these cuts, these
You
silly...
point out
these
peanut butter
silly
and you point out plastic forks.
These
You waste
silly
our time
expenditures.
with these silly little things,
No, I've-
which we're not
I've seen
talking
Mr.
about that. We're
Mr.
talking about pensions
Right.
and funding those pensions.
But here you are asking the taxpayers to fork over the bill, pardon the pun, so you can buy forks, okay? When I see in the last, I didn't even point it out the last time, but Mr. Espiritu enjoyed $178 worth of food at some conference he was at, that the taxpayer, these little things add up. Are you telling me at your house, Mr. Gallagher, that you do not watch your budget, you don't go shopping at one store to save money? In other words, you don't go collecting coupons or anything like that? You don't try to find the best deal on things? You don't watch the family budget? I'm certain you do. I'm certain all of you up there do that, but why can't we do this for the
What's the
city?
point you're trying to make?
I'm trying to point out there is tons of waste in this budget.
You're talking
You guys
about,
just
you're
spend
talking
and
about a
spend and
line
spend.
item situation,
Line
on a
items.
completely different balance or different account in regards to food expenditures versus what we're doing here in regards to the actual tax rate or tax levy for the property taxes in regards to pension funding. So you pick your topic you want to talk about. Is it the pension funding and the property taxes, or is it the day-to-day expenses that we have here at the city? That seems to be where your biggest ire comes from, if I'm not mistaken.
That's
is
part of it.
finding line item things in there and saying, who in the world would pay $200 for a hammer or something like that?
Well, I've seen what you guys spend at, you guys do all your spending, you go to the same auto parts store. I bet you guys don't even price out things around here. I'm serious.
Okay, this is
I'm
not,
gonna say-
let's stay at the tax levy, Mr. Charbonneau. I'm going to ask you to sit down, please.
Okay, Mr. Gallagher brought me on another topic, so thank Mr. Gallagher for that. I'm pretty much done with my statement, though. My last question was, would any of you be willing to look at the tax rate and say, hey, if we get a great recovery, Mr. Gallagher, you've said this many times, that things are going to turn around. And they are going to turn around at some point in time, that you will actually say, hey, you know what, we raised the tax rate this year, let's bring it down, and we're not going to spend this extra money on frivolous things. Will any of you else, Mr. Simpson?
I will look at it. Yes.
No, I actually had a few things to say.
Okay, go ahead.
You know, there's a phrase out there, economies of scale. Now, what that means to me is what one of us may do in our individual home. I have a penny jar, by the way, and at the end of the year, I always come out with more than $100 because I collect my change and I
Yeah.
hoard it. And I actually will bend over to pick up a penny in the street. That's how compulsive I can be about it.
That's good.
And I, too, look at the checklist, and I sometimes wonder, what's that? Like, I saw something,
There was a dunk tank last month.
paging through it again, something about radon, some big payment for radon. That didn't bother you. I guess you understood, and I didn't really understand what it was. I had to ask somebody. So I guess you saw the $86,000 payment for radon, and you understood it clearly, and it didn't bother you. But the spoon thing pissed you off. Well, let me get to the heart of what I think you're saying. I believe this council, in its good due diligence, has tried to pare things down, lay people off, have a smaller workforce, go to fewer conferences, and the whole bit. And I can't imagine that the people who are sitting here on this council, or the ones I've met recently who might be running and might get elected the next time, could actually sit here at some point in time in an undefined future and face the situation you're proposing and go in the other direction. Mr. Baker, bless his soul, is not the only one on this council who is interested in the long-term well-being of the citizen and trying to be the watchdog. I think we're all watchdogs to a greater or lesser degree. We don't scrutinize the checklist or not as troubled by it as you are about various things, but I don't, that's an economy of scale thing. I don't think we're sitting here considering this property tax levy to pay these pension benefits to the injury of anyone in our community. And if we get a chance to change that calculation in any way to benefit the citizens, we would be crazy not to do it. And the citizens would be crazy not to storm in here and make us do it. So, I think in the fullness of time, when the economy turns around, if we find ourselves in the situation you hypothesize, that people like yourselves will come into this room and make the statement, and whoever's sitting here will do the right thing. Because I do not think of us as taxi, spendy types. I don't know, I look down this row, I don't see any taxi, spendy types. And there's nobody over here, so.
That's all I have for comments, but we'll let some other people talk.
Okay, anyone else like to come forward with a